Hello, honors pre-calculus students, Mr. Guzzato, and this is problem number 2 on finding the domain of a composition and finding the composition. So if you look at problem number 2, we want to find g of f of x, which is going to be g of x squared minus 4. And then when we plug x squared minus 4 into g, it's going to be 3 minus the quantity x squared minus 4. Very common mistake is people forget those parentheses, so make sure you distribute. So 3 minus x squared plus 4. So the square root of 7 minus x squared. And now we want to find the domain of that function. So for the domain, going back to the earlier unit, we know that 7 minus x squared must be greater than or equal to 0. So solving this particular problem, we can factor. So we get 7, let me erase that. Well, honors pre-calculus students, Mr. Guzzato, and if you look at problem number 2, we want to compose the two functions and find its domain. So g of f of x is equal to g of x squared minus 4. Which then equals, now we're going to plug x squared minus 4 into the other function g, so 3 minus the quantity x squared minus 4. Make sure you put parentheses and distribute, so square root of 3 minus x squared plus 4, which is the square root of 7 minus x squared. To find the domain of this function, there's two things we need to do. We need to look at the final function. So in yellow, we know that 7 minus x squared must be greater or equal to 0. We also must look at the inside function. So if you look at x squared minus 4, you have all real numbers. So we only need to solve that black inequality down below. There's a couple of ways we can do that. The way we might have done it in class is we might factor. So square root of 7 minus x, square root of 7 plus x is greater or equal to 0. And then we're going to put the critical values on the number line. So we're going to put root 7 and negative root 7. And then we're going to test each interval. So if you pick a number bigger than root 7, you got to test if it's positive or negative. In this case, it'll be negative. If you pick a number in between negative root 7 and 7, that quantity will be positive. And to the left of negative root 7 is negative. So the domain here would be negative root 7 to root 7. In contrast, let's just suppose it said f of g of x. So f of g of x would be f of the square root 3 minus x. And then we're going to plug root 3 minus x into the function f. So that's going to be 3 minus x, square root of that, squared, minus 4. Which will be 3 minus x minus 4, which then becomes, if you do the math, negative 1 minus x. So the most common mistake is people look at this final function and think the domain is all real numbers, but you must look at the inside function here. So to find the domain for this problem, we know that 3 minus x must be greater than or equal to 0, which means 3 is greater than or equal to x. So the domain here would be negative infinity to 3. And I made a mistake. We should not have brackets around the negative infinity. So negative infinity to 3.